In this video, we'll be filling in the 2024 electoral map based on current polling averages from Real Clear Politics in every single race to see where Harris and Trump stand on the path to 270 electoral votes. We'll begin on the West Coast, where Washington is on track to being a likely Democratic state, California solid, while the polling in Oregon currently shows Harris up by 5%. This will make the state only lean for the Democrats, and so we'll be using new margin classifications in this video. Any state that will go to any candidate by over 15 points is solid. Anything from 7 to 15 is likely. Anything from 2 to 7 is lean, and any margin less than 1% is going to be tilt. So moving on to Nevada, this is a state where Trump continues to lead and has led throughout nearly the entirety of the election cycle. He was leading against Biden by 5 to 6 points, and now against Kamala Harris, the former president remains ahead. Trump leads by 3.7 according to the latest polling average. This is larger than Biden's victory in 2020 or Clinton's in 2016. Nevada is not a state where Democrats have been doing better and better. In fact, they're doing worse in every single election. In 2022, Democrats lost the governorship despite having the incumbent governor running for re-election. And so Nevada is definitely a purple state, and it's a very winnable state for Republicans. And looking at the current polling, Donald Trump is on track to flipping the silver state, which will be lean for the Republicans. Moving on now to Arizona, its 11 electoral votes are going to be pretty important. Donald Trump has to win the state if he wants to stand a chance at winning the election. We saw that back in 2016, Trump carried Arizona by nearly 4 points, but then lost it by possibly the narrowest margin possible in 2020. Joe Biden was a much better candidate and was in a much better position nationwide 4 years ago than Kamala Harris is today. It would not be hard to imagine Donald Trump taking back a state that he lost by such a narrow margin 4 years ago. And so looking at current polling in the state, it does show that Trump is on track to win. The former president leads by 1.5%. Yes, this race has gotten slightly more competitive after Joe Biden dropped out, but I mean, Joe Biden being behind in the polls by 6 points was absolutely abysmal. Polling in Arizona really overestimated Democrats in 2020, and they probably will do so again now in 2024. Trump leads by 1.5 percentage points. It's a pretty healthy margin, but the state will fall into the tilt Republican category, with the former president on track to flipping a second state already. Meanwhile, in Colorado and New Mexico, these two states are going to be significantly more competitive than they were 4 years ago. Joe Biden carried Colorado by nearly 14 points and New Mexico by 11. But today, Colorado is going to be a likely blue state, while New Mexico will fall into the lean category. Colorado will probably go to Harris by just over 7 points, New Mexico probably by just under 7. And so as for these states in the middle of the country, Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, nearly all of Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma are going to be solid for the former president, while the 2nd District of Nebraska is currently tilt Republican. It is among the most competitive voting blocks in the entire country. Trump won this district in 2016, lost it in 2020, but in 2024, he is the very slight favorite. And finally, to finish off the western half of the continental US, we of course have the Lone Star State of Texas. This is a major prize for the Trump-Vance campaign. Republicans haven't won Texas by a solid margin since 2012, but Donald Trump could come close this November. He leads by 13 points according to the most recent poll, and by 7 according to a previous poll from May. And so this will put the former president ahead by 10 points, a double-digit margin, not enough for it to be solid just yet, but Texas will very firmly be in the likely Republican category. Before we continue, only 11% of you guys are actually subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November. And follow me on Twitter for daily political updates, link in the description below. Alaska, of course, is going to be solid for the GOP, while Hawaii will be solid blue. Moving up to the Midwest now, this is going to be a very consequential region. This is where the election will be decided. There are four states that Kamala Harris absolutely has to win if she wants to even stand a chance at winning this election. She must win in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which is going to be very difficult because just look back at 2016. Trump won Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin and was very close to flipping Minnesota as well. So we're going to begin in Minnesota. This is actually Tim Walz's home state. Walz is of course Kamala Harris's running mate. He is the incoming governor and has served as governor now for nearly 6 years. He's obviously going to give Harris a boost in the state. Harris already leads by 8% in the polling. She is definitely the favorite in a state like Minnesota, although that impact from Walz is not going to be felt elsewhere in the Rust Belt. If she had gone with Josh Shapiro, who would have given her benefits in Pennsylvania, that probably would have been a smarter choice. Tim Walz may be from the Midwest, but Pennsylvania is pretty far away. He's really not going to have an impact anywhere outside of his home states. Typically, vice presidential nominees are not too important in swinging the votes of citizens. So starting off in Minnesota, the state is barely going to be likely blue, but with Tim Walz as a running mate, Kamala Harris is no doubt the favorite. Iowa, though, is probably going to be a likely Republican state. It's going to vote for Trump by just under 15 points. We're going to have to take a look at polling for Harris and Trump here when they come out. But as of right now, Trump is the clear favorite, although a 15-point margin is going to be difficult for the former president to achieve. Next up in Wisconsin, this is going to be crucial. Kamala Harris cannot lose the state, and fundamentally, out of the four upper Midwestern states, Wisconsin is the most conservative. So if one out of these states is going to go first, it should be Wisconsin, but the polling right now is showing us a slightly different story. But come election night, we will probably see Wisconsin to be the first to go. Polls in Wisconsin have been known to be notoriously inaccurate, and Kamala Harris currently leads by 0.8%. That's a tilt margin. Donald Trump has lost the lead very recently after Kamala Harris entered the race to replace Joe Biden. But honestly, this is not where Democrats want to be. Just look at the 2020 polling average. Joe Biden led by 6.7% on the day of the election in terms of polling. He eventually won the state by just 1/10 of that margin. That is how poorly Biden did compared to what the polling said. So Kamala Harris leading by 0.8% in the polling really doesn't say too much about this race. Trump is still probably the favorite here, but the polling as of right now does give a very slight advantage to the vice president. So Wisconsin is going to be tilt blue. Before we continue, I want to tell you guys about a tool I use every day to keep up with the latest political development. It's called Ground News, and you can sign up today using my link in the description below. As the media continues to get more biased, Ground News gathers related articles from more than 50,000 sources from around the world in one place, so you can compare how different outlets cover the same topic. Take a look at this story on Harris and Walz continuing their swing state tour in Wisconsin. If we scroll down, we can compare headlines and see that sources on the left, like Ross Story, are emphasizing the size of the crowds that lined up to see the two candidates, while those on the right, like the Washington Examiner, are more concerned with asking questions about Harris's campaign strategy. I especially love Ground News' dedicated 2024 election page, which is what I personally use to stay updated on the latest stories relating to the election in November. Go to ground.news/election time to give it a try. If you sign up through my link, you'll get 40% off the Vantage plan, which is what I use to get unlimited access to all features. Illinois, though, is going to be likely blue, while Indiana is going to be solid red. Moving up to Michigan, the Wolverine state is fundamentally the most liberal out of the three blue wall states, which consists of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Minnesota at this point is unlikely to be hyper competitive, but Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania definitely are. Trump won Michigan in 2016 by 0.2 of a percentage point, and then in 2020, Joe Biden flipped it, carrying Michigan by nearly 3. Today, according to the polling average, we see Donald Trump behind by 2.4%. Kamala Harris has led in the most recent polls here, although this morning Consol Bloomberg poll you should take with a huge grain of salt. It's really skewing this polling average in favor of the Democrats. Now, Joe Biden was doing pretty poorly earlier this year, but before he dropped out, he almost tied up the race. Trump never needed to win Michigan. This should not be too much of a priority for the former president. And so, yes, Harris leads. It's going to be a lean Democratic state, but it in no way guarantees a victory for the vice president. Moving on to Ohio, Trump leads by nearly 12 points, and so with our new margins, he's going to need to get up to 15 if he wants to win the Buckeye State by a solid margin. But there's no doubt that Trump has had a huge impact on Ohio. It used to be an Obama state in 2012. He flipped the state in 2016, and it's been voting for Trump and Republicans ever since. The governors of Ohio and Iowa, two states that vote pretty similarly, both won their re-elections in 2022 by solid 20-point margins. But on the presidential level, these two states are going to be slightly more competitive, but they're going to be Trump states without a doubt. And to finish off the Midwest with the Keystone State of Pennsylvania, Donald Trump is currently the favorite, and this is very worrying for the Harris campaign because this is a state that she really had to win. She has to win at least 5 out of the 8 Midwestern states. Currently, she's only won 4, and she's not going to win Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is currently tilt Republican, with Donald Trump leading by 0.8%. In fact, Kamala Harris has only led in 1 out of the 6 most recent polls that have come out of the state. And so Pennsylvania will be in the Trump category. It will elude the vice president. And without Pennsylvania, things will get very, very difficult. She's going to have to win states like Georgia, North Carolina, maybe even Florida to make up for it. And that is just highly unlikely to happen if Trump does indeed carry the Keystone State. Now, moving up to the Northeast, most of these states are going to be solid blue, so we're just going to fill them in right now. We have Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, as well as Maryland and the District of Columbia, along with the 1st District of Maine. New Jersey and Delaware are going to be likely for the vice president, and the 2nd District of Maine is, of course, going to be solid red. So we're left with 3 states to go over, beginning with the Empire State of New York, where Kamala Harris leads by 14 percentage points. Not really the greatest margin for a Democrat, considering the last time that any Democratic nominee won New York by less than a 15-point margin was Michael Dukakis in 1988. So really not the greatest performance for the vice president in such a crucial Democratic stronghold. Harris up by 14. If you looked at the polling when Biden was still in the race, he was on track to winning New York by a single-digit margin. So yes, things are getting pretty bad for Democrats in a seat that they carried so easily by nearly 24 points just 40 years ago. New York is going to be a likely Democratic state, along with New Jersey and Delaware. In New Hampshire, we have Kamala Harris leading by 5.7. Biden carried the state by 7 points in 2020. However, in 2016, Clinton came very close to losing the state. It was the 2nd closest election on the entire map. Only Michigan was more competitive. So yes, Trump can win in New Hampshire, but as of right now, Harris does maintain a pretty solid lead, although it does seem like, according to the polling, that lead is only starting to decrease. And so Kamala Harris up by 5.7 is going to make the Granite State lean in favor of the Democrats. And finally, up in Maine, this is a state that isn't talked about too much. It only has 2 electoral votes coming out of the at-large vote. Democrats almost always win this, and Kamala Harris leads by 9%, the same margin that Joe Biden carried Maine by in 2020. So Maine, to finish out the Northeast, is going to be likely Democratic. Moving down to the Southeast now, we're going to start off by filling in the solid Trump states, beginning with Missouri, but also including Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and South Carolina. These have all been Trump states at some point over the last 8 years, and they're going to remain in the Republican column in 2024. We have 4 more competitive states left to go over, with neither candidate at 270 electoral votes quite yet. Beginning with Virginia, Kamala Harris leads by 5 points according to the latest New York Times poll. This will be enough to put her ahead by a lean margin. Virginia definitely still favors Democrats, but Republicans can get competitive here. They currently hold the governorship with Glenn Youngkin elected in 2021, and Donald Trump actually took the polling lead against Joe Biden in the average right before Biden dropped out. So there is a vulnerability for Democrats here, but as of right now, Trump is not favored to win, although things may change in the coming months. In North Carolina, the former president is on track to win. He leads by 3.2% in a state that he carried by 1.3 4 years ago. North Carolina also went to Trump in 2016. He won it by a nearly 4 point margin. And so probably going to return to a margin more reminiscent of what we saw 8 years ago. The Tar Heel state is currently lean red, with Trump having led in every single poll against Kamala Harris. There's no way she's going to win this state. North Carolina has only gone blue once since 1976, and that was in 2008 when Barack Obama carried the state by a third of a percentage point. So today, North Carolina is going to be lean Republican. Georgia, though, is going to be slightly more competitive with Donald Trump in the lead by a lesser margin. Trump actually lost the Peach State in 2020 to Biden by 0.24%. It was the closest state of the entire election. But now in 2024, Trump maintains a tilt margin of victory. Trump leads by 0.6% according to the polling average. Yes, Harris has done some catching up since she's entered the race 3 weeks ago, but the former president is still no doubt the favorite. It's a state that he carried by over 5 points in 2016. And fundamentally, Georgia is still definitely more Republican than it is Democratic. Governor Brian Kemp was reelected by a likely margin in 2022. Donald Trump is not going to perform as well as the governor, but he is no doubt the favorite to win. Georgia is going to be tilt Republican. And finally, in Florida, again, this used to be one of the most competitive states in the entire country. Today, it is among the most Republican, with Donald Trump leading by 8.5% in the polling average. There's no way Harris is even going to come close. Florida has essentially disappeared off of the battleground state map. It used to be one of the top swing states. Just look at the 2012 election. Barack Obama wins Florida by the narrowest margin of any state on the entire map. But today, Trump is on track to winning by a nearly double-digit margin. So Florida is going to be likely red. And so, based on the current RCP polling averages, Donald Trump leads with 288 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 250. There's no doubt the election is going to be a little bit more competitive than it was just a few weeks ago, but the former president remains the favorite, and you have to remember that polling has almost always underestimated support for Trump in those key battleground states. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November, and join my Discord server, link in the description below.